Oh, yes. A video about how messed up people and how evil people have been throughout history. What am I talking about? Well, today we're going to be looking at 5 of the worst execution methods throughout history. Buckle up because this gets very gross. This is a horror channel and there's nothing more scarier than people, especially once you look through our history. We have been known to be savages, murdering people left and right, wars and what we do to other people, especially back in the day. I mean, we still do stuff today, but when you look through history and what we've done to people, it's pretty gross. And coming in at number 5, or one of the worst torture methods ever, is flaying. Flaying? Or skinned alive. Let's say skinned alive because that's a great term on itself. Now, I don't want to imagine what it's like to be skinned alive. I'm sure it's not very nice, but it is a form of unimaginable pain, skinning you alive, which can last for a very long time. It's bloody, it's painful, and like I said, it lasts for a very long time. It was first documented back in 800 BC, and it has been used as a form of torture throughout pretty much every century, although I don't think today we do it anymore. If it is something stupid back then, like you broke the law or, you went back on religion, I guess was one of the bigger ones. Renounced your vows. They would start by tenderizing you. I know, they kind of treat you like you're a sirloin steak. They throw you out in the sun and you get really hot and red. So that kind of tenderizes your meat, right? Also, it prolongs the flaying process, apparently. Or they would dip you in boiling hot water just to, get that meat and skin nice and loose. Once you're out of the sun or the water, they would take a knife and they would cut you in certain sections of the body. First starting with your face. So that beautiful, handsome face like mine or yours would be peeled right off. Great imagery. But they would have to cut you in certain sections of the body so that it would be easier to actually pull off your skin. They would start on the arms, the wrists, the feet, the neck, the chest, pretty much like the main areas of the body. Well, the cuts weren't deep, but they're just deep enough. Your skin would be removed in large sections, like sheets. We're not talking little, we're just gonna peel a little bit off here, we're gonna peel a little bit off there. We're talking like full, like forearm, Terminator style. Maybe your old chest comes off. You can say bye to that beautiful tan if you have one. Chest hair, no more. You're gonna lose a lot of blood if you didn't know this already. I mean, once you start removing skin, then, blood will start flowing. Doesn't take a doctor to really understand why that would happen. Infection was set in right away. You would start to feel like every nerve ending in your body just screaming and hollering, help me, help me. Then your brain, listening to it, would be like, okay, I'm going to try and help you here. What can I do? Well, I'm going to shut off certain parts of the body, maybe. Shut off the arm so you don't feel it, or maybe it just shuts the whole body down altogether, instantly killing you. I mean, I think when you're in that situation, maybe death would be a lot better than being skinned alive. Although, as we get through these, death would be a lot better than having to go through any of these. You'd be one of the lucky ones if you actually died early from shock or blood loss. But this could last for a couple of days. You could be alive with no skin on your body for a couple of days. You would actually be able to sit there and be, oh wow, so this is how buff I look. For a couple of days, that's insane. I don't know, like what's worse than this? Well, to me, this is at my number 5. We have other ones that we're gonna look at that I find that a little bit more gruesome than this. More creative than just peeling off skin. So let's jump into the next one, shall we? Being boiled alive. Is at number 4. Yes, boiling alive is at number 4, and this is truly an awful one. There have been accounts of people becoming actual tea bags or soups. This was a pretty common execution back in 1500s. If you stole a loaf of bread, boiled alive. If you slept with your neighbor's wife, boiled alive. It's kind of terrifying to actually think that this was a common way to execute people. Just throwing them into a giant pot and then turning the stove up to well, I guess it didn't have stoves, but you know what I mean, just cranking the heat up and then just watching them blah, 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 blah. Pretty horrific. But then again, everything on this list is pretty horrific. Curiosity though is probably bubbling in the little brain of yours, I can tell. What happens to the body when you're boiled alive? Well, let me break it down to you in detail. So let's assume you are dropped into a giant pot of boiling water. That's if the water's already boiling, you'd be dropped in. Chances are shock would set in pretty quickly and you would die probably right up, maybe a minute in or seconds in, because your body just can handle the intense heat, right? But the way they used to do it, they'd set you in a pot, maybe tie you, or maybe just kind of hang you over, right? And they let the water get warm and warmer and warmer. And as the water gets warmer, your body would slowly adjust to this, so that shock wouldn't set in too quickly. So at the start of it, it's not too bad, you know, you're just sitting there. It's a nice little bath. You know, like, oh yeah, nice little hot tub. But then it gets a little bit too hot for you. That's where your skin starts to become red, starts to blister. It won't be a quick death, trust me on this. So as you slowly become a lobster, the fat inside your body would actually start to break down inside you, and the cells would start to stick together, and blood would not flow right. Your skin would end up becoming hard and would start to peel back. Ugh. You'll smell yourself cooking. So the last thought that you could actually have is, wow, I smell delicious. A little bit dark there. Which, I mean, it could be a nice last thought. You know, you're being boiled alive. You're like, oh my God, how'd I get myself into this mess? This is horrible. Although I do smell pretty good, we gotta try and look on the bright side here. If your head is dipped under the water, then your brain would start boiling inside your skull. You would go blind in your eyes. Even if your head is above water, you still would go blind from the steam. If you're wearing any clothes, they would slowly become infused and become one with you. There have been accounts of people falling into hot springs and going to rescue their dog or having their clothes on. And when they're getting pulled out, they're just all like disfigured, and their clothes and their shirts are like just like one with the skin. If we try to remove shirt, might be removing some skin there with you. No amount of modern medicine could bring you back from this. Number 4, boiling alive. Not good. Wouldn't recommend it. Damn, if you boil a lobster alive, it's pretty good. Yar, this one goes out to the pirates. Keelhauling. This one is number 3 because I feel like it's very creative. A really messed up person, or maybe a group of people, would have to think of something like this due to a person. I mean, yeah, filleting, it's okay. We're just gonna cut the skin off. Boiling somebody, big pot of water. But this next one is quite creative. It is one of the worst forms of punishment in naval history. This was used in the 17th century to the 19th century. There were a couple forms of this punishment that we're going to be going through. One of the more or lesser gruesome ways, and this wasn't a way to kill anybody, was to actually tie a rope to them and drag them up to the yard. It's part of the boat of the pirate ship or a naval ship that goes up and crosses with a sail attached to it, I believe. And they tie this rope around you, the arms behind your back, and they would pull you off and drop you right into the water. Then they pull you back up and then do it again. Or they'd drop you into the water with a weight attached to you and just kind of let you sink for a little bit, then pull you back up. It was kind of like a way of, I guess, waterboarding back then. Another way would be to drop you and catch you just before you hit the water, dislocating your shoulders and maybe even tearing your arms off in worst cases. When the dislocation of the shoulders happen, they bring you back up and then untie you and say, okay, get the hell out of here. You're dismissed from the naval now, or you're dismissed or as a pirate or whatever they did back then. But the worst form of keel hauling would be to drag the person underneath the ship along the keel, which is a structural part that kind of runs underneath the boat. So they would drag the person underneath the boat from one end to the other, either the front or their back facing the bottom of the boat, being dragged right underneath. Like, oh, that doesn't sound too bad, but take into account barnacles and other stuff build up underneath the boat that are just sharp and razor and like very hard. So as they're being dragged across slowly, and then you get that feeling of drowning, they're actually being cut pretty much like everywhere. Their face, chest, their legs, their groin, and just being dragged across the bottom of this boat. And they get pulled up. And if the victim was still alive, they would do it again until they were pretty much dead. There have been accounts throughout history where after the keel hauling, the body that they see there is unrecognizable from the person that they once were. And when I say they're being dragged underneath the boat, I mean they're being dragged from one rope to the other, as chunks of skin being taken out, and then back under they go until there's just nothing left. It's pretty gross. It takes a very creative mind to think of something like that. Let me just throw this out there. This used to be done publicly. If there's mutiny, cases of violence against comrades or civilians, these people would be keel-hogged till they're dead, or dislocated shoulders, or drown them. But keel hauling, it's something you don't want to go through. Coming in at number 2. Yes, number 2. We're almost there at number 1. Number 2, hang, drawn, and quartered. Yes, it's truly a double threat. So this was a punishment back in England. Punishment is a very soft word for this one, for men who are found guilty of treason. So how this punishment would go down is if you're caught for treason or something bad, what would happen is they'd hook you onto the back of a horse, onto like a wooden plank, and you would be dragged through the crowd to where you'd be executed. So far not too bad. You're just strapped to a horse on this wooden plank or a wooden frame, and you're just taken off with a horse. Then you would be hanged by a rope for a short time, almost until you're dead. And at this point, I would be like, I wish I was dead. They would remove you from hanging, which you would still be alive. The victim would then be laid down like this, on their back, and then they'll be cut right down the abdomen. His intestines, sex, organs would be removed, which referred to drawing. But a lot of people think that when you're being pulled by the horse, that's drawing. But if you think about it, if your intestines and your organs are being pulled out, they're being drawn out of you. So I think this is what it means to be drawn. You would probably still be alive by this point, right? But remember, they're still corded. This is the cherry on top of the punishment. They would then chop off your head, chop off your limbs, corded. And then your bodies would be spread out around the city to be, put on display. If you ever think about treason, well then look at Frank over here, all right? He lost his head because he was a treasoner. I mean, I wouldn't do it. I enjoy my organs and limbs and my certain special places. So here's to England for making the top 2 list. Number 1 is, I haven't even heard of this until I looked this up. Worst execution in history, thanks to the Persians, is something called SCAFism. I think I'm saying that right. Don't hold me to it. If I'm pronouncing it wrong, please let me know. To really understand SCAFism, there's only been 2, I think, accounts of this actually happening. And we're going to look at Mithridates, who was a young Persian soldier, just living his life. Life is good, working for the army, gets to enjoy that nice weather. Then oops, he accidentally killed the rebel claimant to the throne of Sirius the Younger. You think you had a bad day? This was probably the worst day of his life. Biggest oopsie in history? Yes. So for this punishment, they would take 2 boats and nail them shut with the person in the middle. The top boat would have a section in it for the head, so the head was exposed. Then you'd have his arms and then his legs exposed as well outside of the boat, while his body was still inside. So far, not too bad, right? Kind of like an old school life jacket made of wood. Next thing they would do, they would force feed him milk, force feed him honey, and if he wouldn't eat it, they would prick his eyes and just force feed him until his stomach was so distended from all the milk and honey. After force feeding this guy, they would pour the milk on his face and rub the honey just all over him. And they made sure that his face was exposed to the sun. You're probably thinking, all right, this guy's getting a free meal. This doesn't sound so bad. Like, what else could be worse than that? It's not over. They would feed him so much until he shat himself inside the boat. Now remember, he's kind of trapped in there, right? From this, the feces would sprout worms and like other nasty little crawlers and germs and stuff that would kind of build up in the poop. And then those things would slowly make their way inside his lower intestine and would slowly start to eat him from the inside. As he was being eaten from the inside, he'd also be being eaten from the outside, from vermin or from flies on his face. He was said to have so many flies on his face you couldn't see his face at all. He was pinned in a floating coffin, force-fed honey and milk until he pooped himself. This would then sprout feces and maggots and all that kind of stuff that made its way into his bowels, which would start to eat him from the inside out. The honey and milk would attract flies and other vermin to start to eat him from the outside also. This was a very slow death for him. I feel very bad for him. I mean, he accidentally killed him. It wasn't like he did it on purpose. But they said this lasted 17 days until he died. Can you imagine that? 17 days. Laying in your own poop. Having your outside eaten alive by flies and rats and whatever else. And then your insides, just feel the insides. Disgusting, gross, and the number 1 for the worst execution method in history. But this kind of stuff has always fascinated me. It's all very interesting to read, to go back in our history. And, I guess I have a little messed up mind, but if you're watching this, so do you. I see you there. It's crazy to see what we used to do to each other. It's very disgusting, it's very sad, but also very interesting. But hey, if you're looking for more content, check out the playlist over here. Right there. Ta-da! And as always, I'll see you in the next creepy video.